Makata was quick to realize that in this lovely young woman who stood no taller than a well-grown child, he was up against a far cleverer antagonist than he had at first supposed. He must talk to her a little. His eyes and voice would do the rest.
Mrs. Eaton, it is quite obvious to me that you distrust me, and I am not surprised. But your intelligence emboldens me to think that I am likely to serve my purpose better by putting my cards on the table. I do not propose to discuss with you the rights or wrongs of practicing the magic art. I will confine myself to saying that I am a practitioner of some experience, and Simon, who has interested himself in these things for the past few months, shows great promise of one day achieving considerable powers. Monsieur de Richelieu has probably led you to suppose that I am a most evil person, but in fairness I must protest that such a view of me is quite untrue. In magic there is neither good nor evil. It is only the science of causing change to occur by means of will. Anything which is done in secret naturally begets a reputation for mystery. Genuine adepts in the secret art have the power to call certain entities which are not understood or admitted by the profane into actual being. Now, these are perfectly harmless as long as they are under the control of the practitioner. This applies to the work Simon and I are engaged upon. It needs both of us to operate this thing with skill and safety, but if I am to be left to handle it alone, the forces which we have engendered will undoubtedly escape and do the very gravest harm both to Simon and myself. Have I made the position clear?
Yes, murmured Marie-Lou. It suddenly seemed to her absurd that this nice, charming gentleman could be dangerous to anyone.
I am rather an expert in the art of blending perfumes, and quite a number of my women friends have allowed me to make a special scent for them. You have outstanding individuality, Mrs. Eaton, and it would be a great pleasure if you would allow me to see if I could not compound something really distinctive in that way for you.
It sounds very interesting. Marie-Lou's voice was low, and Makata's eyes still held hers. Really, she felt, despite his bulk, he was a most attractive person.
When will the Duke be back?
I don't know, Marie-Lou found herself answering, but I'm afraid he won't be back before 6.
And our American friend, the young giant?
I have no idea. He has gone down to the village.
I see. What a pity. But of course your husband is here entertaining Simon, is he not?
Yes, they are upstairs together.
Well, presently I should like to explain to your husband, just as I have to you, how very important it is that I should take Simon back with me tonight. Oh, but I wonder first if I might beg a glass of water.
Of course. Marie-Lou rose to her feet and pressed the bell. Wouldn't you prefer a cup of tea or a glass of wine and some biscuits? She added.
You are most kind, but just a glass of water and a biscuit, if I may.
The butler appeared with water and biscuits on a tray. Makata, for the moment, took no notice of it. Instead, he said,
I do hope you will forgive me asking, but have you recently been ill? You are looking as though you were terribly run down and very, very tired.
No, said Marie-Lou slowly. I haven't been ill. Her limbs seemed to relax, and her heavy eyelids weighed upon her eyes. I'm so sorry, she said sleepily, but I am tired, most awfully tired. What was it that you were talking about?
We shall not talk any more, he said. You will sleep, and at 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the 7th of May, you will call on me at Simon's house in St. John's Wood.
The door was flung back, and Fleur came scampering into the room.
Darling, what is it?
Marilou struggled wide awake, and Makata snapped his finger with a disappointed gesture. The sudden entrance of the child had broken the current of delicate vibrations.
"Mummy, Mummy," Fleur panted. "So this is your little daughter? What a lovely child. Come here, Don't you touch her!" Marilou cried, snatching up the child. "Don't you dare!" "Really, Mrs. Eaton, surely you cannot think that I meant to hurt the child. I thought, too, that we were beginning to understand each other so well." "You beast!" Marilou cried as she dabbed her finger on the bell. "You tried to hypnotize me." "What nonsense! I fear I bored you, and I hardly wonder that you nearly fell asleep." As Malin arrived, she thrust Fleur into the astonished butler's arms. "Fetch Mr. Eaton. He's in the garden. Quickly, at once." The butler hurried off with Fleur, and Makata turned on her. "It is vital that I should at least see Simon before I leave this house." "You shan't," she stormed. "You had better go before my husband comes. Do you hear?" And she found herself looking at him again, and quickly jerked her head away so that she should not see his eyes. Yet she caught his gesture as he stooped to pick up the glass of water from the table. Furious at the way she had been tricked into ordering it for him, she sprang forward and dashed the little table to the ground. The plate caught the carafe as it fell and smashed it into a dozen pieces. The biscuits scattered, and the water spread in a shallow lake upon the carpet. Makata swung round, his eyes, muddied now with all the foulness of his true nature, threatening 1,000 unspeakable abominations. "Hello, what's all this?" Richard, it's Makata. I saw him because I thought you'd better stay with Simon, but he tried to hypnotize me. Have him thrown out. Oh, have him thrown out." Richard caught the look of terror in his wife's eyes and took a quick step towards Makata. "If you weren't twice my age and in my house, I'd smash your face in, and that won't stop me either unless you get out thundering quick." With incredible swiftness, Makata had his anger under control. His face was benign and smiling once more. "I'm afraid your wife is a little upset. It is this spring weather, and while we were talking together she nearly fell asleep. Having heard all sorts of extraordinary things about me from your friends, she scared herself into thinking that I tried to hypnotize her. I apologize profoundly for having caused her one moment's distress." "I don't believe one word of that," replied Richard. "Now kindly leave the house." "You're being very unreasonable, Mr. Eaton. I called this afternoon in order to take Simon Aaron back to London." "Well, you're not going to." "The whole situation has been most gravely misrepresented to you, as I explained to your wife. I even asked her to send for you, as she will tell you herself." "It was a trick," cried Marilou. "Don't look at his eyes, Richard, and for God's sake turn him out." Richard's face was white. "You had better go before I lose my temper." "It's a pity that you're so pig-headed, my young friend. By retaining Simon here, you are bringing extreme peril both on him and on yourself. But since you refuse to be reasonable and let me take him with me, let me at least have 5 minutes' conversation with him alone." "Not 5 seconds." "All right, if that is your final word." Makata seemed to grow in size and strength. A terrible force and energy suddenly began to shake his obese body. "Then I will send the messenger to your house tonight, and he shall take Simon from you alive or dead." Without another word, Makata left them. He did not turn or once look back, but plodded heavily down the long, sunlit drive. Richard felt Marilou's small body tremble against him. "Oh, darling," she wailed, "I'm frightened of that man, frightened. Did you see?" "See what, my sweet?" "Why, he is walking in the sunshine, but he has no shadow."
The inn which served the village near Cardinal's Folly could provide all the comfort which any reasonable person might demand. Rex, who knew the place from his previous visit to Cardinal's Folly, hurried into the low, comfortably furnished lounge. Tanith was there alone. She jumped up from her chair and ran to meet him.
"Oh, thank God you've come," she cried.
"But how did you know I was at Cardinal's Folly?"
She sank down in the chair again. "I'm terribly sorry about last night. I think I was mad when I stole your car and tried to get to the Sabbath. I crashed, of course, and then I did the last 5 miles on foot."
"Good God, you mean to say that you got there after all?"
"I could not help myself. My feet simply moved against my will."
"But how did you know where to find me?" he asked.
All systems of divination are merely so many methods of obscuring the outer vision in order that the inner may become clear. Tea leaves, crystals, melting wax, lees of wine, cards, water, entrails, birds, sift-turning, sand, and all the rest. I took some paper from the lounge and borrowed a pencil. Then I threw myself into a trance with the paper before me and the pencil in my hand. When I looked at it again, I had quite enough information scribbled down to enable me to follow you here."
Rex accepted this amazing explanation quite calmly. "I'm mighty sorry, but I've got Simon to look after, so I can't stay here much longer."
"Oh, Rex," her eyes held his, "you must not go unless you take me with you. If you leave me alone, Mokata will be certain to get me."
Rex hesitated. If Tanith was telling the truth, he couldn't possibly leave her, but was she? Had Mokata planted her there in order to lure him deliberately away from Simon's side? "What are you afraid might happen if I leave you?" he asked.
"You can't, you mustn't," she pleaded. "Mokata has 100 means of knowing where Simon is and where I am too. He may arrive here at any moment. I cannot resist him, and he'll work through me, however much my will is set against it. He's told me that he has never met a woman who is such a successful medium for him as myself."
"What do you think he'll do when he turns up?"
"He will throw me into a trance and call Simon to him. Then, if Simon fails to come, Mokata may curse him through me."
Rex shrugged. "Oh, don't worry. Dorishlo's a wily old bird. He'll turn the curse aside some way."
"But you don't seem to understand. If a curse is sent out, it must lodge somewhere. And if it fails to reach its objective because there is an equally strong influence working against it, the vibrations recoil and impinge upon the sender. He never does things himself. He uses other people, hypnotizes them, and makes them throw out the thought or the wish. That is what he will do to me. If he succeeds, you will no longer be able to protect Simon, and if he fails, it is I who will pay the price. That is why you've just got to stay with me and prevent him using me as his instrument."
Rex's brain was working swiftly. If she were telling the truth, she was in real danger. If not, at least Simon still had Richard and Marie-Lou to take care of him until the Duke's return. "All right, I'll stay," he said. "But tell me, just why is it you're such a kingpin medium to this man?"
Tanith looked at him. "There's rather an unusual link between us. My number is 20, so is his. I mean our astrological number. Each letter of the alphabet has a numerical value. By substituting numbers for letters in anyone's name and adding them up, you get their occult number, which indicates the planet that influences them most in all spiritual affairs. If you take the names Mokata and Tanith, you'll see that. M equals 4, O equals 7, C equals 3, A equals 1, T equals 4, A equals 1, 20. 2 plus 0 equals 2. T equals 4, A equals 1, N equals 5, I equals 1, T equals 4, H equals 5. 20. 2 plus 0 equals 2. You see how closely our vibrations are attuned. 2 is the value of the moon, to which both he and I are subject. And any names having a total numerical value which reduce by progressive additions to 2, such as 11, or 29, or 38, or 47,
would give us some affinity, but that they add up to the same compound number shows we are attuned to a very remarkable degree. Now this is amazing, Tanith exclaimed. The Duke not only comes under the 8, like Simon, but their compound number, 35, is the same as well. If anyone in the world can save your friend, that extraordinary combination of strength and sympathy will enable de Richelieu to do so.
But the name Rin comes to 8 as well. That's strange, isn't it? Said Rex.
Not altogether. Your other friend, Richard Eaton, is a 4 person, which accounts for his sympathy towards you. The 8 is formed by 2 halves or circles, and 4 being the half of 8, persons with those numbers will always incline towards each other. Then his wife, like myself, is a 2, which is again linked to all 4 of you because it is divisible into 8.
Rex nodded. Would this combination of 8s be a good thing, do you reckon, or no?
It is very, very potent, she said slowly. 888 is the number given to our Lord by students of occultism in his aspect as a Redeemer. Add them together and you get 24. 2 plus 4 equals 6, which is the number of Venus, the representative of love. That is the complete opposite of 666, which Revelations give as the number of the beast. The 3 6s add to 18, and 1 plus 8 equals 9, the symbol of Mars, de Richelieu's secondary quality, which makes him a great leader and fighter, but in its pure state represents destruction, force, and war.
At the mention of war, Rex's whole mind was jerked to a mental picture of de Richelieu as he had stood with the light of dawn breaking over Stonehenge. He saw again the Duke's grey face as he spoke of the talisman of Set, that terrible gateway out of hell through which, if Makata found it, those dread 4 horsemen would come riding, invisible, but all-powerful, to poison the thoughts of peace-loving people and manipulate unscrupulous statesmen, influencing them to plunge Europe into fresh calamity. Not only had they to fight Makata for Simon's safety and Tanith's as well, but they had to kill him, even if they were forced to sacrifice themselves. De Richelieu had stated that while daylight lasted, the Satanist was no more powerful than any other thug. Why, Rex thought, should he not seize Makata by force when he arrived, then send for the Duke to decide what they should do with him? One difficulty seemed to stand in the way. He could hardly attack a visitor and hold him prisoner in the Pride of Peacocks. But apparently Makata could find Tanith with equal ease, wherever she was, so she must be got out of the inn to some place where the business could be done without interference. He remembered the woods at the bottom of the garden behind the inn. If he took Tanith there, and Makata did turn up, he would have a perfectly free hand in dealing with him. He glanced across at Tanith. What about a little stroll?
If you like. She rose sleepily. I dare not go to sleep in any case. You mustn't let me until tomorrow morning. After midnight it will be May the 2nd, and my birthday. So during the dark hours tonight I shall be passing into my fatal day. It may be good or evil, but it is almost certain to bring some crisis in my life, and I'm afraid, Rex. He led her out through the back door into the depths of the wood until the fresh green beech trees hid them from the windows of the inn. He laid her down very gently on a sloping bank.
You love me, he said suddenly, don't you?
Yes, she confessed, I do. But you mustn't love me, Rex. I'm going to die soon, before the year is out.
You're not going to die. If we both die tomorrow, we've still got today. And I love you, Tanith. That's all there is to it.
Her arms crept up about his neck, and with sudden strength she kissed him on the mouth. "Rex," she said softly, "I'm utterly done in with this. I haven't slept for nearly 36 hours. I ought not to now, but I'll never be able to stay awake tonight unless I do." "No harm can come to me while you're with me, can it?" "No," he said. "Neither man nor devil shall harm you while I'm around." In another moment she was sound asleep. The shadows lengthened, the night drew on, and at last darkness fell, with Tanith still sleeping. The night of the ordeal had come, and they were alone in the forest. At 6:15, de Richelieu arrived back at Cardinal's Folly, and Richard told him of Mokata's visit. "I'm not surprised," the Duke admitted. "He must be pretty desperate to come here in daylight on the chance of seeing Simon, but of course he is working against time now. Did he threaten to return?" "Yes. Do you really think he can work some devilry tonight?" De Richelieu nodded. "I'm certain of it. And I'm worried, Richard. My luck was out today. Father Brandon was away. The young priest I saw would not entrust me with the host, nor could I persuade him to come with it himself. And that is the only certain protection against the sort of thing Mokata may send against us. We must rely upon my knowledge of esoteric formulae. I have the most important aids with me already, but I should be glad if you would send down to the village blacksmith for 5 horseshoes. They must be brand new. That is essential." The mention of the village having reminded him of Rex, he told the Duke how their friend had been called away to the inn. De Richelieu's face fell. "We must telephone at once." The landlord could give them little information. De Richelieu shrugged. "The young fool. I only pray to God that he turns up again before nightfall. Where is Simon now?" "With Marie-Lou. They're upstairs in the nursery, I think, watching Fleur being bathed and put to bed." "Good. Let us go up then. Fleur can help us very greatly in protecting him tonight." "Fleur?" The Duke nodded. "The prayers of a virgin woman are amazingly powerful in such instances, and the younger she is, the stronger her vibrations. You see, a little child like Fleur, who is old enough to pray, but absolutely unsoiled in any way, is the nearest that any human being can get to absolute purity. You have no objection, I take it?" "None. Saying a prayer for Simon cannot possibly harm the child in any way. We'll go up through the library." They entered Fleur's nursery on the floor above, through a sliding panel in the wall. The Duke smiled at Fleur. "Does Mummy watch you say your prayers every night?" he asked gently. "Oh, yes," she said. "Well, we're all going to say them together tonight. We could all kneel down in a circle, couldn't we, and put Uncle Simon in the middle." "Just like kissing the ring?" "That's right, or postman's knock, and you shall be the postman. But this is very serious, and instead of touching him on the shoulder, you must hold his hand very tight." They all knelt down then, and Fleur extended her palm to Simon. The first few lines of the Our Father came tumbling out from the child's lips, a prompting whisper from Marie-Lou, and an equally breathless ending. The little personal supplication for Mummy and Daddy and Uncle Simon and Uncle Rex and Uncle Grey Eyes and dear Nanny were hurried through. "Now," whispered de Richelieu, "I want you to repeat everything I say, word for word, after me." And in a low, clear voice he offered up an entreaty that the Father of all would forgive his servants their sins and strengthen them to resist temptation, keeping at bay by his limitless power all evil things that walked in darkness, and bringing them safely by his especial mercy to see again the glory of the morning light. When all was done, and Fleur tucked up and kissed, the others filed downstairs to Marie-Lou's cosy sitting-room. "We should have a light supper fairly early," de Richelieu announced. And after that, I should like you to make it quite clear to Malin that none of the servants are to come into this wing of the house until tomorrow morning. In no circumstances must we be disturbed, or any doors opened and shut." "Hadn't we better disconnect the telephone as well?" Simon hazarded, "in case it rings after we've settled down?" "Yes, with Richard's permission, I will attend to that myself." "Do, if you like, and I'll see to the servants," Richard agreed. "But what do you call a light supper?" "Just enough to keep up our strength. A little fish, if you have it. If not, eggs will do, with vegetables or a salad and some fruit, but no meat or game, and of course, no wine." Richard grunted. Marie-Lou stood up. "I shall go and order supper." For a while, de Richelieu strode up and down, answering Richard's questions and ramming home his arguments for a belief in the power of the supernatural to affect mankind, until, when Marie-Lou rejoined them, Richard's brown eyes no longer held the half-mocking humour which had twinkled in them before. He found himself toying with the idea that Simon might really be threatened by some very dangerous and potent force, which it would need all their courage to resist during the dark hours that lay ahead. It was 8 o'clock now. It seemed that their long talk had elucidated the position and even strengthened the bond between them. Like men who were about to go into physical battle, they realized that their strongest hope lay in putting their absolute trust in each other. They went into the dining room and sat down to a cold supper which had already been laid out. When they had finished, the Duke leant over to Richard. "I think the library would be the best place to conduct my experiments, and I shall require the largest jug you have, full of fresh water, some glasses. Oh, and it would be best to leave the fruit." The three men and Marie-Lou moved into the library. "We must strip the room, furniture, curtains, everything," said the Duke, "and I shall need brooms and a mop to polish the floor." They worked in silence until nothing remained in the big library except rows of gilt-tooled books. "I would like the room gone over thoroughly, particularly the floor, since evil emanations can fasten on the least trace of dust to assist their materialization. Would you see to it, Princess, while I telephone the inn again?" With Richard's and Simon's help, Marie-Lou set about dusting, sweeping, and polishing, until, when de Richelieu rejoined them, the boards were so scrupulously clean that they could have eaten from them. "No news of Rex, worse luck, and I've had to disconnect the telephone now. We'd better go upstairs and change next." "Into what?" Richard inquired. "Pyjamas. I hope you have a good supply. You see, none of us tonight must wear any garment which has been even slightly soiled. Human impurities are bound to linger in one's clothes, even if they've only been worn for a few hours, and it is just upon such things that elementals fasten most readily." "Shan't we be awfully cold?" hazarded Simon. "There's no reason why we should not wear a couple of suits apiece of Richard's underclothes beneath the pyjamas to keep us warm. The essential point is that everything must be absolutely clean." The whole party then migrated upstairs, where they ransacked Richard's wardrobe for suitable attire. Marie-Lou joined them a little later in peach silk pyjamas and silk stockings. "Now for a raid on the linen cupboard," said de Richelieu. "Cushions, being soiled already, are useless to us, but I'm dreading that hard floor, so we will take down as many sheets as we can carry, clean bath towels and blankets too, and then we shall have some sort of couch to sit on." In the library once more they set down their bundles, and de Richelieu produced his suitcase, taking from it a piece of chalk, a length of string, and a foot rule. Marking a spot in the centre of the room, he asked Marie-Lou to hold the end of the string to it, measuring off exactly 7 feet, and then, using her as a pivot, he drew a large circle in chalk upon the floor. Next, the string was lengthened and an outer circle drawn. And then the most difficult part of the operation began. A 5-rayed star had to be made, with its points touching the outer circle and its valleys resting upon the inner. But, as the Duke explained, while such a defence can be highly potent if it is constructed with geometrical accuracy, should the angles vary to any marked degree or the distance of the apexes from the central point differ more than a fraction, the pentacle would prove not only useless, but even dangerous. For half an hour they measured and checked with string and rule and marking chalk, but Richard proved useful here, for all his life he'd been an expert with maps and plans and was even something of an amateur architect. At last, the broad chalk lines were drawn to the Duke's satisfaction, forming the magical 5-pointed star, in which it was his intention that they should remain while darkness lasted. He then chalked in with careful spacing round the rim of the inner circle the powerful exorcism, In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, Elohim, Soter, Emmanuel, Sabaoth, Agia Tetragrammaton, Agios Otheos, Iskiros. And after reference to an old book which he had brought with him, drew certain curious and ancient symbols in the valleys and the mounts of the microcosmic star. When the skeleton of this astral fortress was completed, the clean bedding was laid out inside it, and de Richelieu produced further impedimenta from his case. With lengths of asafoetida de grass and blue wax, he sealed the windows, the door leading to the hall, and that concealed in the bookshelves which led to the nursery above, making the sign of the cross in holy water over every seal as he completed it. Then he ordered the others inside the pentacle, assuring himself that every light in the room was on, made up the fire with a great pile of logs so that it would last well through the night and there would be no question of their having to leave the circle to replenish it, and, joining them where they had squatted down on the thick mat of blankets, he produced 5 little silver cups, which he proceeded to fill 2/3 full with holy water. These he placed, one in each valley of the pentacle. Then, taking 5 long, white tapering candles, such as are offered by devotees to the saints in Catholic churches, he lit them from an old-fashioned tinder box and set them upright, one at each apex of the 5-pointed star. In their rear he placed the 5 brand-new horseshoes which Richard had secured from the village, with their horns pointing outward, and beyond each vase of holy water he set a dried mandrake, 4 females and 1 male, the male being in the valley to the north. These complicated formulas for the erection of outward barriers being at last finished, the Duke turned his attention to the individual protection of his friends and himself. 4 long wreaths of garlic flowers were strung together, and each of the party placed one about his neck. Rosaries with little golden crucifixes attached were distributed, medals of St. Benedict holding the cross in his right hand and the holy rule in his left, and phials of salt and mercury. Lengths of the asafoetida grass were again tied round Simon's wrists and ankles, and he was placed in their midst, facing towards the north. The Duke then performed the final rites of sealing the 9 openings of each of their bodies. All this performance had entirely failed to impress Richard. Before coming downstairs, he had tucked a loaded automatic comfortably away beneath his pyjama jacket. "We have ample room here," said de Richelieu, "so there is no reason why we should not lie down with our feet towards the rim of the circle and try to get some sleep. But there are certain instructions I would like to give you before we settle down." "Before you give us your final order for the night, tell us about this talisman," Richard said. "You know the legend of Isis and Osiris?" the Duke asked. "Yes, vaguely," Richard replied. "They were the king and queen of heaven who came to earth in human form and taught the Egyptians all they knew, weren't they?" De Richelieu nodded. "Osiris was a fair-haired, light-skinned man, alien to the Egyptian race, who became their king. He had a brother named Set. Here again you get the 2 principles of good and evil, light and darkness, for Set was a dark man, tall, slim, and handsome, a fine athlete and a great hunter, but a cultured, amusing person, too, and a boon companion. The type whose lapses men are always ready to condone on account of their delightful personality, and whose wickedness women persuade themselves is only waywardness. Set conspired to slay the king and seize his wife and power for himself. Osiris was a god, and Set dared not spill one drop of the divine blood. The Egyptians considered this present life to be only an interlude. Set utilized the national preoccupation with death and ceremonial burial to ensnare his brother. He secured Osiris's exact measurements. Then he had made the most beautiful sarcophagus that had ever been seen. Set prepared a great banquet to which he invited Osiris and 72 of the younger nobles, all of whom he had corrupted and drawn one by one into his conspiracy. As a final hospitality, Prince Set proclaimed, "You have all seen the sarcophagus which stands in the anteroom, and it is my wish that one of you should receive it as a gift. He whom it fits may take it with my blessing." One after another they got inside and lay down, but not one of them fitted it exactly. Osiris lowered himself into the masterpiece, and behold, it fitted his tall, broad-shouldered body to a hair's breadth. No sooner was he inside than the principal conspirators rushed forward with the weighty lid. They nailed it down and poured molten lead upon it, so that Osiris may have survived an hour in agony, but died at last of suffocation. Set thus succeeded in killing his brother without spilling one drop of his blood. He had the chest cast into the Nile, but Isis recovered it and fled to the marshes of the delta. Set swore that he would hunt Isis down, kill her, and find Osiris's body and destroy it forever. One night he and his nobles, hunting by the light of the moon, recognized the chest and broke it into pieces. Set orders the body to be torn into 14 pieces and the parts distributed throughout the kingdom. Isis roamed the country, seeking for the dismembered portions of her husband. Wherever she found one, she erected a great temple to his memory. She succeeded in finding 13 pieces of the body, but the 14th she never found. That Set had carefully embalmed and kept himself. The portion Set retained was the most potent of all charms, the phallus of the dead god, his brother. It has since been heard of many times. For long periods it has been completely lost, but whenever it is found, it brings calamity upon the world, and that is the thing which we have to prevent Mokata securing at all costs today, the talisman of Set. The Duke paused to look at each of them in turn. Listen carefully, because this is vitally serious. What may happen, I have no idea. Mokata threatened to get Simon away from us. I cannot tell you what form his attack is likely to take, but I am sure he will do his damnedest to break us up and get Simon out of our care tonight. He may send the most terrible powers against us, but there is one thing above all others that I want you to remember. As long as we stay inside this pentacle, we shall be safe. But if any one of us sets one foot outside it, we risk eternal damnation. We may be called upon to witness the sort of horrors which it is difficult for you to conceive. But they cannot do us the least harm as long as we remain where we are. Poor Simon is likely to be afflicted worst, because the campaign will center on an attempt to make him break out of the circle, but we've got to stop him by force if need be. There are two main defenses which we can bring into play. One is the blue vibration. Shut your eyes and try to think of yourselves as standing in an oval of blue light. The oval is your aura, and the color blue exceedingly potent in all things pertaining to the spirit. The other is prayer. Confine yourselves to saying over and over again, "O Lord, protect me. O Lord, protect me." There was a murmur of assent. "Simon," the Duke went on, I want you to say 7 times, Om Mani Padme Om. That is the invocation to Manathea, your higher self." Simon did as he was bid. Then they knelt together, and each offered a silent prayer that the power of light might guard and protect them from all uncleanness, and that each might be granted strength to aid the others, should they be faced with any peril. They lay down then, and tried to rest, despite the burning candles and the soft glow of the electric light. Sleep was impossible to them in such circumstances. The steady ticking of a clock from somewhere in the house. A log fell in the fire grate. Then the little noises of the night were hushed, and an immense silence seemed to have fallen upon them. Watching, listening, intent, they lay silent, waiting to see what the night would bring. Tanith slept peacefully, curled up in Rex's arms. With infinite precaution not to disturb her, he looked at his watch and found that the time was nearly 8 o'clock. De Richelieu should be back by now, and after all it was unlikely that Makata could prevent his return before sundown. Rex had an utter faith that de Richelieu would fight to the last ditch, with all the skill and cunning of his subtle brain, and that stubborn, tenacious courage that Rex knew so well, before he would surrender their friend to the evil powers again. It was dark now. Another hour crept by, and then Tanith stirred. "Rex, where are we?" she murmured. "What has happened? I've had an awful dream." He smiled down at her and kissed her full on the lips. "Together, that's all that matters. But if you must know, we're in the wood behind the roadhouse. But we can't stay here all night. We'd best go back to the roadhouse. They will be able to prepare a meal for us." "Yes," she sighed. "I'm hungry now, terribly hungry." When they reached the lounge of the Pride of Peacocks, they found that it was already 9:30. Rex tried to telephone immediately, but the village exchange told him that the line to Cardinal's Folly was out of order. Then he sent for Mr. Wilkes, and inquired if it was too late for them to have a hot meal. "Not at all, sir." Mr. Wilkes bent, deferential, benign. "My wife will be very happy to cook you a little dinner. And to drink, red wine, if I might make so bold, would be best with the grill." Rex wavered. He recalled de Richelieu's prohibition against alcohol. But he was feeling all the strain now of the events which had taken place in the last 48 hours. Tanith, too, was looking pale and drawn, despite her sleep. A bottle of good Burgundy was the very thing they needed to give them fresh strength and courage. Good wine could surely harm no one, so he acquiesced. When the chicken was served, Mr. Wilkes murmured something about a sweet, and Rex nodded vaguely, which resulted in the production of a flaming omelette au kirsch. After the meal, Rex tried to get on to Cardinal's Folly again, but the line was still out of order, so he scribbled a note to Richard saying that he was safe and well and would ring them in the morning, then asked Wilkes to have it sent up to the house by hand. It was decided that they spend the night together in the empty lounge. Tanith had already booked a room, and so to make all things orderly in the mind of the good Mr. Wilkes, Rex booked another, but told the landlord that they would probably remain in the lounge until very late, and so he was not to bother about them when he locked up. The fire was made up, and they settled down comfortably under the shelter of the big mantel in the ingle nook. No sooner had the maid withdrawn than they had their arms about each other once more, and began that delightful first exchange of confidences about their previous lives, which is such a blissful hour for all lovers. "I'm frightened, Rex." I know, but I've a feeling that you're scaring yourself more than is really necessary." "I'm afraid you don't understand," she murmured. "A Satanist who is as far along the path as Mokata does not need a motive to do murder, and my having left him in the lurch at such a critical time is quite sufficient to anger him into bringing about my death. I tell you, sweet, he'll never risk doing murder. In this country it is far too dangerous a game.
But his murders are not like ordinary murders. He can kill from a distance if he likes.
What? By sticking pins in a little wax figure with your name scratched on it? Or letting it melt away before the fire until you pine and die?
That is one way, but he is more likely to use the blood of white mice.
How in the world do you mean?
When a very advanced adept wishes to kill someone, he feeds a white mouse on some of the holy wafers that they compel people to steal from churches for them. The sacrilegious aspect of the thing is very important, you see. Then they perform the Catholic ceremony of baptism over the mouse, christening it with a name as that of their intended victim. That creates an affinity between the mouse and the person far stronger than carving their name on any image.
Then they kill the mouse,
No, I don't think so. They draw off some of its blood, impregnate that with their malefic will, vaporize it, and call up an elemental to feed upon its essence. Then they perform a mystic transfusion in their victim's veins, causing the elemental to poison them. But I'm not afraid to die. It is what may come after that terrifies me so.
Surely he can't harm anybody once they're dead.
But he can. If he kills me that way, he can make me dead to the world. But I shall live on as an undead, and that would be horrible. I suppose you have heard of a vampire?
Why, yes, I've read of them in fiction. They're supposed to come out of their graves every night and drink the blood of human beings, until they're found out. Then their graves are opened up for a priest to cut off their head and drive stakes through their hearts. Is that what you call an undead?
Yes, that is an undead, a foul, revolting thing, a living corpse that creeps through the night like a great white slug, and a body bloated from drinking people's blood. But have you never read of them in other books beside nightmare fiction? Where I come from, the whole countryside is riddled with vampire stories from real life. When graves have been opened on suspicion, the corpses of vampires have been found months after burial without the slightest sign of decay, their flesh pink and flushed, their eyes wide open, bright and staring. Often they have been found with fresh blood trickling out of the sides of their mouths. If Mokata did get hold of me again, he would not need to perform those ghastly rites with impregnated blood. He could just throw me into the hypnotic state, and after he'd made me do all he wished, allow some terrible thing to take possession of me at once. The elemental would still remain in my body when he killed me, and I should become one of those loathsome creatures, the undead, if that happened this very night.
Stop. I can't bear to think of it. But he shan't get hold of you. We'll fight him, and I'm going to marry you tomorrow so that I can be with you constantly. We'll apply for a special license first thing in the morning.
If you wish it, Rex, and I do believe that by your love and strength you can save me, but you mustn't leave me for a single second tonight, and we mustn't sleep a wink. Listen. The bell in the village steeple chimed the 12 strokes of midnight. It is the 2nd of May now, my fatal day.
I won't leave you, and we won't sleep either.
She stood up then, making a graceful, slender silhouette against the flickering flames of the fire. I must just slip upstairs to powder my nose, and when I come back, we'll settle down in earnest to make a night of it together.
I thought you said that I wasn't to let you leave me even for a second. I don't like your going upstairs alone at all.
I can hardly take you with me, and I shan't be more than a few moments.
All right. I'll give you 5 minutes by that clock, but no more, remember. And if you're not down then, I'll come up and get you.